Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away, and also its lusts. But the one who does the will of God abides forever. I opened last week by talking about the great challenge that a preacher has whenever he steps into the pulpit of trying to address or exhort or edify all groups within the church. You know, from younger to older, the preacher has that challenge of trying to edify not just one group, but all of them. He has that challenge. But that's not the only challenge that a preacher has when he steps into the pulpit. He also has the duty of trying to help the listeners with what they may be presently struggling with in their own lives by using God's Word. He also has that challenge. And so the real challenge that a preacher has is trying to meet the needs and helping with the how. Helping with the how. Too often many preachers stand in a pulpit, every Sunday, and I've been guilty of this, but they stand up in the pulpit and they give lots of explanation. They give lots of explanation. They can explain the text very well, and they can tell you what it means, but sometimes what's lacking is the so what. Sometimes what's lacking is the why. Sometimes what's lacking is the how. Preacher, how do I do this? Sometimes that's what's lacking. And unfortunately, a lot of times people, they leave a service, they walk out of a service, they walk away from a sermon thinking, that was all well and good. He told me a lot of stuff that I probably could have went and read on my own. But he didn't really help me. He didn't really help me with what I'm struggling with. And sometimes they leave without any guidance from God's Word on what to do for their lives. This passage in 1 John chapter 2, 15 to 17, I think is one that people may read and understand, okay, I'm a Christian and I know not to love the things of the world. I know that I shouldn't have a close relationship with the values and the desires of the world. I know that I shouldn't have an affection with the practices of the world or be friends with the world like that. I think a lot of people understand that, but they may still struggle with how not to do that. And I think some would even ask the question, how do I not do that? How do I not give into the things of the world and the temptations of the world that continue to bombard my life on a daily basis? How do I not do that? How do I not give into the lust of the flesh? How do I not succumb to the things that my eyes sometimes want to look at and are drawn to? How do I deal with the temptation to exalt myself? How do I overcome the world? How do I do it? That's what we want to talk about this morning. Overcoming the world. Overcoming the world. I think, first of all, what he says in verse 15 is something that we do need to address because it is tied to how we can overcome the world. He says in verse 15, do not love the world nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So number one, how can we overcome the world? Well, that starts first by not running with the world. Not running with the world. as John is writing, he's having to combat these people that were promoting this idea that you could live a worldly life and yet still have a relationship with God. But John says, no, do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone does love the world, remember, the love of the Father is not in him. So he's really trying to make very clear in their minds of things that they should not do or should not believe. And he's telling these Christians that they cannot, even for a second, believe that they can live this dual lifestyle. And the reason why is simply because it just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. I don't think this is a surprise to us. But if we want to overcome the world, he's telling us, look, you can't have one hand trying to hang on to the world and another hand trying to hang on to God. In no way, form, or fashion can you have the best of both worlds. That's not the way that it works. And trust me, I've tried it. It doesn't work that way. You can't do it. You can't live a worldly life trying to enjoy all the fleeting pleasures that it offers and somehow try to enjoy the blessings of being in a relationship with God. That does not work. And I think sometimes people fool themselves into thinking that it can work like that. I mean, I sometimes see people, I don't know if you see people, but sometimes I see people, they're posting things, about their life and the things that they're doing on their social media, things that God might not approve of, if you catch my drift, but then, like a week later, they're posting spiritual things, like, happy to be around my church family, I feel so blessed. And you just look at that and it's like, no, that's not the way that it works. You can't say that you love God but still love the things in the world. You cannot have both. You can't be on the fence. You can't play this game with God thinking that you can live in this world and that world. You can't live in both camps. You've got to pick one. You've got to pick one. And so listen, if you're going to say that you love God, yet you're still flirting with the things of the world, look, it's going to speak. It's going to speak pretty loud and clear, not just to other people. It's going to speak pretty loud and clear to God that the love that you have for the world right now is greater than the love that you have for Him. It's all or none in this deal. It's all or none. You take all of it or none of it. You either love God or you love the world. And if you want to overcome the world, first and foremost, you've got to choose God. You cannot run with the world. That's the first step that you've got to take. He goes on and he talks about some of these things that are in the world. He kind of breaks it down almost. Things that we ought not run with. But the first one being in verse 16, the lust of the flesh. So we could ask the question, okay, how that's something of the world. How do I deal with not giving in to that temptation? How do I do that? Well, I think one of the best things that you could probably do is stop making provisions for it. Stop making provisions for it. Paul wrote in Romans chapter 13, 12 through 14, he said this, that the night is almost gone and the day is near. Therefore, let us lay aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us behave properly as in the day, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual promiscuity and sensuality, not in strife and jealousy, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ, and notice what he says, and make no provision for the flesh in regard to its lusts. Now, a lust of the flesh is a desire. It's a desire for anything really that your flesh wants that is not godly. All right, it's a craving, it's a coveting, it's a wanting of something. It's something that you want, that you think would be pleasurable or gratifying or enjoyable. But when it's a lust of the flesh, it's a lust after something that God does not approve of. And if we're talking about not making any provisions for those things, we're talking about not putting ourselves in a position to where we would give in to those temptations. We all have those things in our lives that our flesh wants to do or grab onto or experience or indulge in. For example, maybe a fleshly lust that you have is greed, for example. You're always kind of wanting the next best thing, or maybe you're up into the late hours of the night and you're shopping on the internet or Amazon because you just want more and you think that you've got to have more. Sometimes our flesh gets a hold of us and we want to engage in arguments that are, I would say, not conducive to godliness. There are times when we feel like we should speak up or speak out to maybe prove our point. Maybe we want to feel smarter and prove to people that we're right. A lot of times that happens with social media. And as soon as you go to the comments section, what are you tempted to do? You're tempted to correct somebody. You're tempted to maybe shame someone, or you get that little bit of keyboard courage behind you. Hey, they're not going to see me. They don't know who I am. You just let it loose, man. That happens. And you end up just having fruitless discussions. Maybe the lust of the flesh is food and it's overindulgence, and sometimes you just can't say no to things. It might be an addiction to social media or entertainment, TV, binge watching things, and maybe the lust of the flesh is those sexual desires. Maybe your flesh thinks that it would be enjoyable to send that text message to that person late at night, or to get close with that coworker at your job. Maybe you're dating someone and your flesh keeps telling you that it's okay to go a little bit further when you're alone with that person. Maybe your flesh wants you to lust after someone or something in your mind. Look, whatever it is, don't make provisions for it. Don't feed it. You have to cut it off and remove those things that want to feed your flesh. Starve it out, so to speak. So look, if it's greed that you struggle with, or this desire to have more, it sounds simple and silly maybe, but quit shopping. Unsubscribe from the emails that flood your inbox with 20% off here and 15% off there. I get those all the time. They're so annoying. Delete the Amazon app off your phone if you have to. Make it harder to access it. Keep it only on your desktop, maybe to where it's a bit of a nuisance to have to go shop. Have your spouse keep you accountable, or a friend. Be transparent with what you're buying and what you're spending money on. Do something that prevents you from feeding into what your flesh wants. Don't go to the comment section every time you go to Facebook and YouTube. Don't go there. Don't even get on it at all. And if it is the sexual lust, look, you've got to make sure that you set up boundaries for yourself. Listen, leave your phone in the kitchen at night if you have to. Okay, so that you're not texted or tempted to text somebody. Make sure that you're not ever alone with a coworker at work. Okay, look, just to overcome this stuff and how to properly deal with those temptations that your flesh wants, you have to stop making provisions for it. That's how you're going to overcome it. You've got to make a change somewhere. Now, the next one that he talks about is kind of similar. He talks about the lust of the eyes. Whoop. Did this a couple weeks ago. All right. He talks about the lust of the eyes. I don't know that, this all has to do with sexual desire. It certainly does include that. But a lusting of the eyes could be viewed as an unhealthy desire for things that look good to you. You remember when Satan tempted Eve all the way back in the garden? By the way, it was with the same three temptations that John is talking about here that Satan got Eve with. He also tried the same thing with Jesus, and that didn't fly. But anyway, you go back to Genesis 3 in verse 6. Look what it says. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, there's your lust of the flesh, and it was a delight to the eyes, there you go, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate, and she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. She saw that it was a delight to her eyes. You see, this is craving something that was forbidden for her to have because it looked pleasing to her. And so the question is, how do we overcome things like that? How do we overcome things that God says, no, you can't have that, even though they still look very appealing for us to have? How do we do that? I think one of the biggest things that we have to learn to do is that we've got to learn to be content. Learn to be content. All right? This all comes in different areas, but I do believe that if we can practice contentment, it will diminish that lust for those things that we can't have. And I hope that makes sense. But I think it'll diminish that craving if we're content. You think about how people may have a desire for gaining wealth or more possessions. Paul gave a nod to this in 1 Timothy chapter 6, 8 and 9. He says, if we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction. So, there's people that want to get rich, but some of those desires can destroy them. Their desires for that becomes harmful, and so he says contentment is the key. What about drugs or alcohol? Some people see those things as pleasurable. It looks good to their eyes, and sometimes they use those substances to escape from their present reality. But the lust for that might not be there if they were just content with living in being sober and living a sober life, if they could just find contentment and joy in that. And of course, we do have those sexualized things of the world that draw the attention of our eyes, but they're forbidden for our eyes. How do we not succumb to those things? How do I prevent a lusting with my eyes? I think making no provision would also fall under this as well. You still don't want to put yourself in positions to where your eyes are susceptible to see things that you should not see. And so really it's about guarding the gateway. Guarding the gateway. there has to be some guardrails up when it comes to making sure that you don't lust with your eyes. You know, Jesus did say that's not it. There we go. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, 22 to 23, he says the eye is the lamp of the body. So then if your eye is clear, well, your whole body is going to be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body is going to be full of darkness. If then the light that's in you is darkness, how great, he says, is that darkness? Our eyes are the gateway into our whole body. You know, if we're not guarding what we're seeing, we can eventually become full of darkness. So how do we prevent that from happening? Well, look, if you know that there are certain websites, certain TV shows, movies even that are going to show people in a way that is forbidden for you to look at, you've got to guard against those things. Don't go to those. Don't watch them. Turn the halftime show off. I don't know. If it's social media that you know sometimes has inappropriate things come across the screen when you're scrolling on those shorts and those reels constantly, just doom scrolling, don't do that. Don't follow those certain accounts. Report those certain accounts. That's what I do whenever they show up. It's annoying. You've got to put guardrails in place. I love what Job actually said in Job 31 and verse 1. Job had said, I have made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I gaze at a virgin? I love that language. I've always tried to remember that. I've made a covenant with my eyes. And I think that's part of what you have to do. You just have to decide that I'm not going to be led by lustful eyes. That's not what's going to lead me. I'm going to make a covenant with them. I'm not going to put myself in certain situations to where maybe I'm tempted to sin with my eyes. I'm going to take the necessary precautions so that doesn't happen. But you know one thing too, I also think that if we can fix our eyes more on heavenly things and spiritual things, I think that also would take away the lust of physical things as well. To rely on self more than God. Sometimes it shows itself when we're boastful about the things that we own or when we seek attention. Sometimes it shows up and it causes us to be arrogant or braggadocious. Maybe about things that we have done or things that we are doing. But it's definitely an attitude that can destroy a person. I think we've probably heard the proverb before that pride does go before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall in Proverbs 16:8. The Bible has a lot to say about pride, and it's just as serious as lust is. I mean, John ropes it in with the other two. And it really is more than just being confident. It can move over into a sinful realm. But I think part of overcoming this kind of attitude has to come down to reshifting our mindset that is more in line with God. He does say that pride is something that comes from the world. It's very much a worldly attitude. And so we've got to not be, conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. That's what Romans chapter 12 and verse 2 says. So part of that renewal, I think, is just, finding other things to boast in other than yourself. Because pride says, look at me. Look at what I've done. And at every turn, you try to direct things back on yourself. So when there are those opportunities and times to exalt self, Or if someone wants to praise you for something, maybe just say, I've been very blessed. I've been afforded a lot of good opportunities. I've been very fortunate by God. He's allowed me to do this or that. Maybe just say that next time. You see, that totally redirects it off of you, and it redirects it and puts it back on God instead. And that's part of practicing humility. When you boast in God and not yourself. Or sometimes you can practice that humility by looking for ways to encourage other people instead of you constantly receiving the recognition. You don't have to have the spotlight all the time. Put it on someone else. And then maybe a few more things, to cut off some of that boasting. Maybe go serve somebody else one day. Sacrifice for someone else one day. Start serving and sacrificing for other people and not just you. Because the more that you serve self, the more inflated you're going to be. And a lot of times, the bigger you become, the smaller and smaller God becomes in your life. So work on service and sacrifice. Remember what Jesus said about the greatest among you shall be your servant. The more we will love the world, and the less we will love God. Less we will love God. The more we will love the world, the less we'll love God. And the more we're about that, the further and further away from God we're going to be. The world is passing away, and also its lust, but the one who does the will of God lives forever. The one who does the will of God will not pass away with the world and all that comes with it. You see, one leads to death and one leads to life with God forever. And so unless we want to pass away with the world, we've got to work on overcoming the world. And so, folks, the invitation is open. If you want help overcoming the world, get with Jesus and watch how He can transform your life. That's it. And if you want to do that, we can help you with that. We can help you with that if you want. Let's stand and sing our song.